Greetings, fellow alchemists, and welcome to Wordplay Wizardry. Last time, we talked about a few writer rules. Not writing rules, but writer rules. Rules for you. If you'd like to check out that video, click on the link below. In this video, I'd like to step away from the building aspect and focus on something a little more far-reaching. Titles. And notice I made that word plural, titles, with an S, because there's more than one. So let's name and define them and discuss the importance of each. First, the names. And those are book, collection, or main title, subtitle, and piece or chapter title. The final one is working title, but we'll get to that in a moment. As you can imagine, book title is what you call the finished and complete manuscript, a book that is ready for print or distribution. You may have noticed that I included collection in that grouping, because this overall title is what you call a collected group of works, such as a series of short stories or a collection of poems. It can also apply to the old school box set, a series of novels, each with their own book title, but an overall title for that particular series. With poems and short stories, each individual item will have a title, but the collection will also have a title. For an example using novels, I have the Oddity Academy series. The collection is called the Eschaton Saga. This covers all 4 books in the series. Moving on, a subtitle is an extension of a title. It serves 2 purposes, either to expand the main title or to be an alternate. Perhaps you've heard of one of the more famous subtitles, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or The Modern Prometheus. The Modern Prometheus being the subtitle. Next up, piece or chapter titles refer to the individual titles given to poems or short stories in a collection, as well as, you might have guessed it, the individual chapters within a novel. While chapter titles don't separate specific items, like a poem title might, they do separate beats within a story. As for poems and short stories, the main title may be the collection title, but in order to separate each particular item and give your reader an easier time, each poem or short story needs its own title. Of course, if you're writing a single poem or single short story, you don't necessarily have to give it a title. You can just write. Though usually this works best with poems and not short stories. For all levels of prose and fiction, the most common practice is to give each piece, regardless of whether it's in a collection or not, a title. If you don't remember what I'm talking about, refer back to the video on word count and goals to see all the levels of fiction and prose. As an aside, anytime you write in long form, it's called prose. Poetry uses verse, fiction uses prose. It comes from the Latin phrase prosa oratio, meaning direct speech. Technically, just about everything you see is prose. But back to my point. The 2 shortest forms of story are flash fiction and short story. And within a collection, each of these would need a title. Now, you may be wondering what working title is. I did mention it and said we'd get to it. Well, here we are. The term refers to a temporary title, used until you decide on the final presentation title. Maybe it's barely a title, or maybe it's just a little too long, or even not long enough. Perhaps just fantasy novel or my book. Now, if you've never written a novel before, just calling it my book is fine. likely because you don't have 4 or 5 in the works. If you do have a list of projects, giving this new one a partially descriptive working title helps to separate it from the others. But what if you don't switch genres and everything is a drama or action adventure? I did use fantasy novel as an example of a working title. And in that case, if you're not switching, then you'd step away from the simple genre moniker, in this case, fantasy novel, and give it a more specialized moniker. This is changing genres, but something like road trip novel to give you an idea, instead of just being drama. If you've been working on a project while watching these videos, there's a chance you have a working title in place. Or maybe you have an actual title, both of which are fine. I'm not going to ask you to change your title, but after this, I am going to ask you to take another look at it. Perhaps just consider it a working title for the moment. And you might be saying, well, what's wrong with it? It sounds fine. And that might be true. But before finalizing, I do want you to consider a few things. First and foremost is the goal of the title. And this goes beyond just naming it. The goal is to catch the reader's eye. And here you might be saying, well, I thought the first job was to describe the book. And it is. But it also needs to grab attention. If you saw genetic chaos theory on a shelf, would you gravitate to it? Probably not. But your eyes will drift to the one called Jurassic Park. And yes, it really should be called Cretaceous Park, but that's not really as catchy, is it? A title should not only describe the story inside, but it should also reach out to readers. It needs to scream, "Read me!" I've spent some time looking at some of the best advice for writing titles, and much of it is the same. There's 4 basic concepts that you need to keep in mind. Make it short, make it memorable, make it unique, make it show off your skill. And there's a few ways to accomplish these. The first way to accomplish this is to try and limit your syllable count. No more than 5 syllables. Jurassic Park, The Shining, Harry Potter. If you absolutely cannot make a title work at 5 syllables, try one more with 6. But do your best not to go over 7 syllables. And right about here, you're probably thinking, well, what about that whole "and" section with Harry Potter? Philosopher's Stone, Prisoner of Azkaban, Chamber of Secrets, Deathly Hallows. That "and" section, technically, those are subtitles. And the only reason that I classify it that way is because Rowling could have easily said Harry Potter 1 or Harry Potter Year 1. The subtitle expands the main title, giving our readers an idea of what's inside. In the case of the first book, it's something involving the Philosopher's Stone. Just remember, something that is short, sweet, and simple will always capture attention more than something that is complex, because something short and sweet is always easy to remember. There's 2 ways to do this. The title stands out, and the title is easy to remember. Memorable, in this case, means, as you might have guessed, easily recalled. I live in the suburbs, so I'm going to use that. But imagine driving down a street. All the houses look the same. In a city, a lot of the buildings look the same. In either case, which one do you remember? Do you remember any of them? In my old neighborhood, growing up, I can remember 2 distinct houses, apart from my own. One with dark red brick and one with pale blue siding. No other house had either feature, so they stand out to me. Something about your title needs to catch the attention and the memory of your readers. But what's the difference between memorable and unique? Cretaceous Carnival is memorable, but it's not unique and really, really derivative. So don't use that. Unique means it should be as original as possible. And look, we can all admit that there is going to be nothing that is purely original. Oddity Academy. How many titles contain Academy? Immediately, Umbrella Academy comes to mind. But the patter and the word-ending alliteration helps Oddity stand out. Don't forget, your title is going to be the first thing a prospective reader sees. It is the very first interaction with you and your work. So give them a taste of what's to come. Now, granted, the blurb does a much better job of doing this, but the title can have some of that flair as well. This is lower on the importance ladder than some of the other points, but you've still got a chance to show off here. So take it. Think about your own interactions with books. The title catches your eye, so you take a closer look and read the blurb. That hooks you in. You thumb through a few pages and get an idea of writing. And if the book itself matches up with expectations from the title and blurb, you buy. Do you see why the title deserves so much attention? It was the very first thing in that series of interactions. Short and memorable are two of the biggest things to keep in mind. Then unique, then the show skill. Those come in third and fourth because of the difficulty involved. It's much easier to show your skill with the blurb than it is the title. If you include a subtitle, there's a little more chance. And it's much harder to be unique with so many books on the market. But that doesn't mean you can't be somewhat unique. When I mentioned the series Star Runner, how many other projects come to mind? I'm guessing 2 right off the bat, and they too start with star, but there's differences. Now, with showing skill, that could just be the amount of thought that goes into crafting the title. Example time. Star Runner. Across the Whole of Time. Star Runner 6 is kind of bland. It's more there to let you know it's in a series and what place in that series it is. But Across the Whole of Time? Much different story. And yes, it is longer than the syllable count I said, but it's also a subtitle, and subtitles play by different rules. It makes use of homophones. Whole instead of whole, because there's a black hole in the beginning, and black holes change time because of gravity across the whole of time. How about the upcoming Star Runner Beyond the Erebus Sea? A sea in space? And what is beyond it? Coffin Nail Creek. Short, memorable, somewhat unique, but it's nuanced and layered, and the story has a creek. And for a revenge story, that title gets you in the mindset for a darker tale. Crafting a great title can be hard, but it's also worth it. I've said it before, but it's your first interaction with readers. This is your very first chance to shine. So, shine. There's way too many mediocre titles out there. And as a reader, I pass over them because the author didn't grab me. Your book could change fiction like any one of the greats, modern or classic. But if you have a bad title, no one will read it. Don't let your story fall through the cracks. Give people a reason to read it. And you do that by putting some time and effort into your title. Just something to bear in mind as we wrap up this video. I said in the beginning, if you had a title for a project already in the works, that was fine, and I meant it. But I also said I was going to ask you to consider it a working title and consider looking back at your title and reworking it. Now I'm asking, take what I've said and go back and look at your titles. Think about them, judge them, show them to other people. What do they think? How do they react? Would they give it a second look, or would they keep walking? Would you give it a second look? Pretend it's not yours, but you see it on the shelf. Are you picking that book up? Just on the title alone. Yes, I know we're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but we do. Maybe not the art, but at least the name. We do judge the title. Otherwise, we'd own every book. How do you feel about that title? Does it make you want to read? Does it make you want to at least check out the blurb? Is it easy to remember? Is it nice and short? Does it flow? Does it sound like its own thing? Is it unique? Does it give a glimpse into who you are as a writer? Just consider these. You don't have to scrap your title, but consider them. And if you don't have a title yet, keep these things in mind when you're thinking of one. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you'd like me to expand on something, leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're enjoying what you watch, leave a comment. Until next time, fellow alchemists.